The stars had gone quiet. First, it was the Varnath, 12-eyed, galaxy-spanning, brilliant in both science and cowardice. They packed up their data cores and vanished without a word. Then the Lithari, glowing crystalline beings, simply fractured their own homeworld and drifted into the void. Dozens of other species followed, scattering across the arms of the galaxy like frightened birds before a storm. It was the Maelstrom. That's what they named it, though no one knew what it truly was. Some claimed it was a sentient wave of dark energy. Others said it was a dimension tearing itself into ours. Regardless, it moved from system to system like a hungry shadow, devouring entire solar systems, leaving behind warped gravity and whispers that drove minds mad. One by one, the ancient civilizations fell silent. Even the proud war-born Dravaks abandoned their colonies, leaving behind fleets and fortresses built over centuries. No one stayed. No one, except us. Humans. No, not because we were brave, not because we were stronger, smarter, or better. It was much simpler than that. We had nowhere else to go. Our kind wasn't welcome in the glittering colonies of the Ilari or the sterile biodomes of the Centauri. To them, humans were unrefined, volatile, impulsive. We were the species that still cried during wars and wrote poetry about our enemies. The other species evolved past their emotions. Humans never did. Maybe that's why we stayed. Or maybe it's because we were just too damn stubborn to run. General Leon Cortez stood on the cracked command balcony of Earth's last orbital fortress, Olympus Core. The blue planet below still spun, proud and scarred. Fires lit her skies. From orbit, they looked like a galaxy being born beneath the clouds. She pressed her knuckles against the cold glass and watched the feeds flicker. Battle lines along Mars, fractured colonies on Ganymede, silent distress calls from Europa. All of them unmanned now. The outer systems were gone. She knew that. The fleet knew that. And the civilians below? They just didn't want to believe it yet. "Ma'am," a voice crackled behind her, strained and hoarse. "Evac Fleet Theta just confirmed total disengagement. The Novari have left. No warning." Cortez didn't turn around. Her fingers curled slightly. "That was the last of the Alliance, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. The comms officer, a young woman named Noor, didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was enough. Cortez finally turned, her black uniform pressed and spotless despite the chaos around her. Her eyes were dry. She'd stopped crying weeks ago. There were no tears left to spend. "Patch me through to all remaining command units," she said. "Planetary and orbital." "Ma'am, do you want—" "All of them." The signal took seconds to stabilize. Holograms buzzed into form across the command deck, hardened men and women from across Earth's last defenses. Pilots in jumpsuits, captains with tired eyes, militia leaders wrapped in bandages. "This is General Cortez," she began, her voice steady, cutting through static and doubt. "I won't waste your time. You've all seen the feeds. The Maelstrom is near. The other species have made their choice. They think we'll run. They think we'll scatter. They think Earth is already lost." She paused. Let the weight sit heavy. "They forgot who we are. They forgot what it means to be human." Around her, heads lifted. Screens blinked. Fists clenched. "We don't run. Not from monsters. Not from nightmares. Not even from gods. This is our world, our sky, our blood in the soil. If this is the end, then let it be our end. Let them write songs about how humans held the line when the stars turned their backs." A silence followed. Not the kind of silence born from fear, but from something else. Resolve. The kind that lives in bones, in old stories told by campfires, the kind that gets etched into monuments and whispered into the ears of children generations later. And so, Earth prepared. They trained in city ruins and ancient bunkers. Factories once shut down now screamed back to life, building railguns and mech suits from scraps. Civilians learned to fight. Kids carried ammo. Elders stood watch with rifles older than themselves. No one complained. No one asked to leave. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, humanity was united. Not for politics, not for religion, not even for power, for survival. And as the sky darkened, as the stars blinked one by one, and the cold breath of the maelstrom reached toward Earth, the last of humanity looked up and did not flinch. The first wave didn't come with fire, it came with silence. Above Earth's thermosphere, long-range sensors blinked offline, one by one. No enemy ships, no physical presence, just a slow collapse of electromagnetic stability, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Satellites dropped from orbit. Communication relays turned to static. In Olympus Core, every screen went dark for precisely 47 seconds. And then, the screaming started. Not on the comms, not over speakers, in their heads. Private Ellis, stationed on the Southwatch orbital turret, fired 3 rounds into the steel walls of his cabin before turning the gun on himself. His last words were, "Make them stop whispering." The turret never came back online. On Earth, thunder rolled across the skies without clouds. Birds fell from trees mid-flight. Dogs howled into corners. Children clutched their heads and screamed without understanding why. It was like a weight pressing down from the heavens, soundless, shapeless, but undeniable. Cortez watched as her crew staggered under the pressure. Some bled from the nose. One man collapsed entirely, his body jerking with seizures. And yet, she remained standing. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the implants in her skull that filtered high-frequency feedback. Or maybe, just maybe, the maelstrom hadn't quite figured out how to break her yet. "Systems rebooting," Noor gasped behind her, sweat dripping from her temple. "EMP defense is holding. Optical backup is online. We're blind beyond geosync orbit, but Olympus Core is stable." Cortez clenched her fists. "What about the ground?" "Power surges reported across all sectors," Noor replied. "Civilian casualties rising. Infrastructure is holding, barely." She nodded grimly. This wasn't a battle of bullets. Not yet. The maelstrom was testing them, trying to break their minds before their bodies. "Tell the planetary command to initiate the Echo protocols," she ordered. "Scramble every psych-shielded drone. I want eyes above every continent. If this thing is coming, I want to see its goddamn shadow." Down on Earth, the defenses stirred. New York's skyline, half collapsed and dark for decades, lit up with anti-air batteries and automated targeting grids. In Siberia, the underground hangars of Base Vostok groaned open, releasing manned interceptors and drones equipped with shielding tech the rest of the galaxy had mocked as primitive overkill. On the Pacific coasts, entire naval fleets, once mothballed, now steamed into formation, crewed by volunteers who'd once been chefs, janitors, or retired veterans who'd sworn never to fight again. But there they were, preparing for a war against a thing no one had ever seen. And then, finally, it came. No ships, no weapons, just a shape. A black wound in the sky just beyond Luna's orbit. At first it looked like a tear in space itself. Stars behind it disappeared, not dimmed, not obscured, gone. The moon cast a long, trembling shadow across Earth, one that pulsed with irregular flickers. Some believed it was alive. Others thought it was death given form. The maelstrom. Cortez stared at it on the optical feed, her jaw set tight. "Is it moving?" "Yes, ma'am," Noor whispered. "Velocity increasing. Trajectory is direct Earth impact." "How long?" 72 hours. The room fell quiet. Cortez turned to her second-in-command, Major Kai Lorne, a mountain of a man with scars like old road maps across his skin. He didn't flinch. Neither did she. "This is it," she said. Kai nodded. "About time?" They both turned toward the crew, eyes bloodshot, faces pale, but none of them wavered. "We've got 3 days to show the galaxy why we're still here," Cortez said loud enough for the entire deck to hear. 3 days to build a wall out of blood, bone, and fire. They all ran. We stayed. So when this thing reaches us, we hit back. Every screen came alive. A single word blinked in crimson across the command center and down into the cities below. Hold. It was the only order left to give. And in the shadow of a dying galaxy, humanity obeyed. The countdown began. 72 hours became 60, then 48. By the time the last day approached, the skies over Earth looked like they had teeth. Orbital turrets bristled like porcupines. The North Atlantic shimmered with defense satellites and fusion-hardened carriers. Cities once full of flickering neon and concrete decay were now fortresses made of humanity's last breath. In those final hours, no one slept. Not soldiers, not civilians, not even children. Everyone was part of something now. No one had time to be afraid. In Nairobi, a 12-year-old girl named Lila wired drone parts together with hands stained from engine grease. In Detroit, ex-convicts loaded ammunition onto rail cars, while priests walked between them, offering cigarettes instead of prayers. In Tokyo, a woman who hadn't spoken since the loss of her brother stood atop a half-collapsed skyscraper, scanning the sky with a handmade railgun taller than she was. Earth didn't just prepare for death. It looked death in the eye and sharpened its teeth. In Olympus Core, Cortez paced the command deck, running off 2 hours of sleep and more caffeine than her heart could take. Her voice was hoarse, her body aching, but her mind cut like a blade. "Status on orbital reinforcements," she barked. "Station Gamma 12 reports full readiness. Luna Base has activated their last-tier nukes. Earth's polar arrays synced and holding," Noor reported, her voice steadier than before. Fear had been replaced by habit. That was how humans survived, not by overcoming terror, but by working through it. And the prototype? Deployed to high orbit, cloaked, just waiting for the trigger. Cortez exhaled. That prototype was humanity's final card. A gravity core weapon so unstable, so terrifying, even the Galactic Council had banned it. Not that the Council mattered now. They were scattered like ashes in the wind. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp tone, an alert that sent chills across the deck. It was here. The maelstrom breached the orbital edge like an oil spill across glass. Darkness unfurled over the sky in jagged lines, as though reality itself was being slashed open, and from that breach came nothing. No sound, no signal. Just absence. Then the pressure returned. People on the ground clutched their ears even though no noise existed. They fell to their knees in parks, in shelters, in war rooms. Blood leaked from their noses and eyes. Some screamed, some prayed, some simply stared, their minds slipping like ice breaking from a ledge. But not everyone. Some held their ground. A grizzled engineer in Moscow, deaf since birth, worked calmly while others wept. Pilots sealed inside cockpit domes sang war songs over the comms, voices trembling but proud. And in a dark basement in Rio, 2 teens uploaded the final targeting patch for South America's last defensive railgun, naming it Hope, because no one else had used that word in days. In orbit, Cortez stared directly at the beast beyond the void. No form, no face, just a shifting hunger in the stars. "Do we fire?" Kai asked beside her. She hesitated. It wasn't a question of permission. They all knew the protocols. Fire when fired upon. Defend Earth at all costs. But what if it wasn't a weapon? What if it was worse? A virus of thought, a force that needed you to react first, to invite it in? Not yet, she said. We wait. The maelstrom pulsed, and then it struck. Not a beam, not a bomb, but gravity. Olympus core groaned, Earth's orbit wobbled, space itself bent, and in the twist of physics, half the lunar fleet was crushed into molten debris without a sound. Just gone. All across Earth, buildings cracked, tectonic plates shifted, tsunamis bloomed on distant shores. The Earth screamed, but didn't shatter, because the shield held. Humanity's last shield, a network of electromagnetic netting and reinforced satellite coils, glimmered to life around the planet. Designed by madmen, funded by thieves, and built by dreamers, it wrapped Earth in a final skin of light. The maelstrom recoiled. Just slightly, enough for Cortez to see something like hesitation. Like confusion. Now, she whispered. Kai slammed his palm onto the trigger pad, and from high orbit, the prototype woke. The gravity core spun, screamed, and exploded into a ripple of force that tore across the upper atmosphere. Not aimed at the maelstrom, but through it, a wound opening a wound. The maelstrom shrieked. Everyone heard it, this time not in their heads, in their souls, a scream so ancient it felt like it came from the birth of the universe, and yet Earth remained, battered, bloodied, still standing. The sky burned. Chunks of lunar debris lit up Earth's atmosphere like a meteor storm. Some of it was metal. Some of it was something else. Matter that twisted and shimmered unnaturally. Fragments of maelstrom touched space curling into strange shapes before vanishing in mid-air. The shield flickered, coughing under the pressure, but it held. In Olympus core, alarms howled like wounded animals. Smoke poured from broken panels. Half the command deck was dark, scorched from an energy backlash no one understood. Engineers shouted over sparks, trying to reroute the fusion core's remaining output to sustain the shield net. Cortez stood in the center of it all, her boots slick with oil, her uniform torn at the shoulder, one side of her face red with burns. She didn't notice. Pain had become irrelevant. "Report!" she barked over the chaos. "The prototype weapon destabilized the outer edge," Noor shouted back. The maelstrom flinched, literally flinched, but it's regrouping. Movement detected again. Denser now, faster. Kai stumbled to her side, coughing, a deep gash across his forehead. "We heard it, didn't kill it, and now it's pissed." That seemed to be the consensus. Across the globe, people cheered when the maelstrom recoiled. For one brief moment, hope surged. But Cortez knew better. Hope wasn't a plan. Hope was just air between one strike and the next. "Begin the final line deployment," she said, barely above a whisper. "Ma'am?" Noor blinked, eyes wide. "That's our last tier." Cortez didn't flinch. "I'm aware." Earth's final defense was codenamed Red Ash, a global network of nuclear reactive kinetic rods, each the size of a city bus, buried deep beneath the crust in seismic fault lines, deserts, and old mine shafts. Not meant to attack, meant to bury the Earth in so much raw chaos that nothing, not even a god, could land without being torn apart. It was the doomsday button, the scorched Earth option. But they were already living on scorched Earth. Within minutes, tremors rippled across fault zones. Massive silos opened in remote zones from Australia to Alaska. Missiles the color of old bones rose silently into launch position. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just codes entered by tired hands. Meanwhile, above the clouds, the maelstrom descended. And this time, it wasn't just a shape. Tendrils of black nothingness stretched toward the planet, not moving through space, but removing space around them. The sky folded. Stars blinked out again. And with every mile it closed, more people collapsed. On the ground, Hospitals overflowed with civilians vomiting, convulsing, or catatonic. People whose minds were too fragile to withstand the psychic pressure. Even strong ones, soldiers, commandos, hardened survivors, began to break. But they didn't run. No one ran. In every command center, every outpost, every city, people tightened their grips on weapons. They wiped the blood from their faces. They screamed into comms, and they stood. In São Paulo, a battalion of ex-militia turned rescuers held the city's last overpass as a command relay post. A man with no legs manned a missile battery with his tongue via neural controls. In Beijing, a schoolyard was converted into an artillery pit. Children carried shells. Teachers fired them. And in a small cabin in Kentucky, a grandfather sat in his rocking chair, holding the hand of his grandson, watching the sky boil. "Is this the end?" the boy asked. The old man looked up, eyes steady. "Number, this is the part we earn the right to not end." Back in orbit, the maelstrom reached the upper atmosphere. Its tendrils made contact with the shield. The sky screamed. Waves of energy rippled across the net. Cities browned out. The ocean trembled. For 5 whole minutes, humanity teetered on the edge of oblivion. And then, a single tendril broke through. One. It pierced the shield near Kazakhstan, snapping through space like a whip made of gravity and madness. It struck a city, Almaty, and the impact didn't explode. It erased. Buildings folded inwards. Color drained from the world. People vanished mid-step. Cortez felt it before the report even came in. Her throat clenched. "No." Kai slammed his fist into the railing. "We have to launch the red ash, now!" Cortez didn't move. "No," she muttered, her eyes focused on something else. The feed. The maelstrom, after erasing Almaty, stopped moving. It didn't advance. It hesitated, as if surprised, as if confused. "That city," Cortez murmured. There was something there, something it didn't expect. "What?" She didn't answer. She turned to Noor. "Get me the signal logs from Almaty's last 30 seconds. I want to know what they broadcasted." Noor hesitated. "That'll take time." "Then run." Because Cortez had a gut feeling, a soldier's instinct, that this thing wasn't just consuming. It was looking for something. And if they could figure out what, they might just have a way to hurt it again, maybe even stop it. The data logs from Almaty were nearly lost. The city's communication array had gone silent the moment the tendril hit. Entire blocks of the global network went dark, like someone had spilled ink on a digital map. But Noor worked like a woman possessed. Her fingers danced across cracked keys, rerouting through emergency beacons, pulling backups from orbiting drones and scavenged cache nodes. It took 15 minutes. In those minutes, Olympus Core ran on fumes. Generators overheated, medical bays flooded. A fire had broken out in Section 7, and there were no hands left to put it out. Cortez ignored it all. Then Noor gasped. "I found something," she whispered. On the main screen, a data stream began to scroll. It wasn't large, barely a few kilobytes. But it was enough. Enough to be strange. Almaty hadn't broadcast a cry for help, not coordinates, not weapons data. They'd transmitted a song, a human lullaby, simple, fragile, sung in Kazakh by a child, no older than 6, the kind of melody sung to babies in cold winters. Raw audio, no encryption, a fading voice among the chaos, and yet it reached the maelstrom. The tendril had struck just seconds after the transmission began. But instead of continuing its advance, it had recoiled, paused, like it had recognized something, or remembered. Cortez stared at the screen, barely breathing. "You're saying a kid's song made that thing hesitate?" Kai asked, incredulous. Noor nodded. "Not just hesitate, it froze, like it didn't know what to do." Silence spread across the command deck. It wasn't logical. It wasn't tactical. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. And then Cortez remembered something buried in a galactic file long before Earth was abandoned, a single classified report from a species called the Utari, before they fled. It mentioned the maelstrom briefly, calling it a hunger born from memory, not a creature, not a machine, but remorse given shape. "What if it's not just trying to destroy us?" she whispered. "What if it's trying to forget us?" Noor paled. "You think it knows humanity?" "I think it did," Cortez said. "Once." The theory was insane, but so was the world now, and something deep in her bones told her it was true. The maelstrom wasn't just wiping out life, it was erasing history, culture, emotion, the pieces that made a species unique. And somehow, something in that child's lullaby cut through the void. "We can't kill it," Cortez muttered. "Not like this. But maybe we can remind it." "Of what?" "That we mattered." Within hours, a global operation was launched. Every surviving broadcast tower, every emergency drone, every satellite was given one task: transmit, not commands, not orders, memories, songs, poems, love letters, laughing voices, cries of newborns, human noise. Africa played ancestral drums across the savannah. In Paris, someone climbed a cathedral and streamed an old opera over mega frequencies. In Mumbai, children recited bedtime stories into cracked microphones. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square, chanting together, "We are still here." The airwaves trembled with life, and above them, the maelstrom shuddered. The tendrils flinched, curling away from the most concentrated transmissions. Where the lullabies were strongest, it hesitated. Where love songs rang, it wept, the sky raining black streaks of sorrow that hissed into mist before touching ground. But it wasn't enough. One of the massive arms coiled downward again, heading for Cairo. Cortez's stomach dropped. "We're losing it," Kai growled. "Number not losing. Not yet." "Broadcast the final signal," she ordered. Noor's hands froze over the console. "You mean, yes." They had one last broadcast, saved for a moment just like this. A universal code, the only one confirmed to be recognized by every known species in the galaxy. Not military, not religious. It was the sound of a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, human. They layered it beneath a song from a long-dead singer, a woman whose voice had crossed centuries and space stations, a love ballad that once played in the background of a wedding, in a city now gone. The signal surged through the net, and the maelstrom paused. The tendril stopped mid-air, inches above Cairo. The blackness around it trembled. For a moment, just one moment, the air felt warm, like sunlight before a storm. Then the unthinkable happened. The tendril retreated. No impact, no erasure. It withdrew. Cortez stood still, eyes wide, heart pounding louder than any broadcast. They hadn't beaten it, but they'd reached it. And something in that vast, ancient sorrow had remembered humanity, and didn't want to forget. Not yet. Silence followed. Not the kind born of fear or devastation, but a deep silence, like the universe itself was holding its breath. The maelstrom had paused. Its tendril hovered in the upper stratosphere, twitching with slow, unsure movements, more like a confused animal than an unstoppable god. The monstrous shadow still loomed, blotting out stars, but it no longer surged forward. And below it, Earth was singing, not in harmony, not in rhythm, but honestly, imperfectly, like humanity always did. There were broken instruments playing in ruined cities, old speakers buzzing from makeshift towers. A wedding violinist from Warsaw played into a radio mic, her dress still soaked in blood. In Tokyo, a child sang his mother's favorite pop song, his voice cracking mid-line. But he kept going. Across deserts and valleys and collapsed streets, stories flowed. People didn't care if they were heard. They had to be remembered. Back in Olympus Core, no one moved. The feed showed it all. Satellite view of a world refusing to vanish. Kai wiped tears off his face, not caring who saw. Noor was slumped in her chair, whispering something that might have been a prayer. Cortez stood like a statue, eyes fixed on the trembling shape in the sky. Then the tremble changed. It wasn't just pulling back, it was fragmenting. The maelstrom's edge rippled, like wind across black water. Portions of it began to fray, turning translucent, glitching, as if memory was fighting oblivion inside that thing's impossible core. Noor's console beeped. "Ma'am, we're receiving signals, not from Earth, from orbit." Cortez snapped out of her trance. "What kind of signals?" "Echoes, reflections bouncing off the maelstrom, but they're not ours." Kai leaned in. "Then whose?" Noor glanced up, eyes wide. "Everyone else's." They stared. She turned the volume up. Through the static came fragments, languages long silenced, voices that shouldn't have existed anymore. An Aurelian battle hymn, a Grelic lullaby, the Unduri's harmonic death chant, and dozens more, the echoes of the species that had once lived and fled. The maelstrom wasn't just made of death, it was made of what was lost. And now, Earth's defiant noise was shaking something loose inside it. "They tried to sing too," Cortez whispered. "Before they ran, before they fell." But they hadn't been loud enough. Or maybe they had given up too soon. Maybe that was what the maelstrom fed on. Abandonment. The absence of memory. The silence left behind. Humanity, for all its flaws, hadn't been silent. Even in the end, they screamed their stories into the void, and now those voices, human and alien, began to harmonize. The signals merged. Across Olympus Core's speakers came a sound that didn't exist in any known file. It wasn't music. It wasn't words. It was something else. A resonance that burrowed into the soul, a chorus of remembrance. Cortez staggered slightly, her vision blurred, not from fatigue, but from something she didn't understand. Feeling. She could feel the maelstrom listening, not just observing, not just reacting. Listening. And then came the shift, not in space, in time. Suddenly, feeds began flickering. Static overtook half the screens. Alarms went haywire, but not with danger, with impossibility. One monitor showed Tokyo in daylight. The next showed it as it was, 3 years ago, before the sky broke. Another screen showed the moon, still whole. Another showed a soldier, long dead, standing tall again. "Noor!" Cortez barked. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know. The maelstrom is interfering with the satellite stream, but not like before. It's—" She stopped, shaking her head. "It's showing us what we used to be." They weren't hallucinations. They were memories, broadcast not by Earth, but by the maelstrom itself. It was returning them, piece by piece, emotion by emotion. Somewhere in that churning, chaotic void, something remembered what it once was. Or who. "It was alive," Cortez whispered. "Once, like us, maybe with us. And when its people died, it broke. It became this." Kai muttered, "You're telling me the maelstrom used to feel?" "I'm telling you," she said slowly. "It might still." The maelstrom began to retract, not retreat. Unravel. The black mass curled inward, spiraling on itself, pulling those tendrils back in like it was collapsing into its own memory. The stars began to return, one by one. The pressure on Earth's atmosphere eased. The shield net, cracked and flickering, stabilized. People watched it happen in stunned silence. In Kenya, a grandmother held her granddaughter tight, whispering stories of the old world. In Moscow, a violinist stopped playing only to watch the night sky open. In Houston, survivors on rooftops pointed upward as the last arc of shadow dissolved into a silver mist. And then the maelstrom was gone. Not destroyed, not defeated. Just gone. Vanished like a story finally finished. For hours, Earth didn't move. People stood in streets, in fields, on rooftops. Faces turned skyward, waiting for the blackness to return, waiting for the tremble in the air, the shriek of a power grid failing, the thunder of something massive breaking through the sky. But it didn't come. The maelstrom had left, and what it left behind was quieter than death. Hope. Cortez didn't realize she'd been gripping the edge of the console until blood returned to her fingers. Noor was sobbing now, openly, shoulders shaking with each breath. Kai didn't even try to stop the tears. He just kept staring at the stars as they blinked back into view. The feed across Olympus core glitched one last time. Then everything stabilized. Normal. Boring even. No static. No screams. Just blinking lights and diagnostic pings from systems that hadn't operated in weeks. The kind of thing that used to irritate engineers, and now felt like music. They had made it. But Cortez wasn't celebrating. Not yet. "Status?" she asked, voice hoarse. Noor wiped her eyes, nodded. "Satnet's operational. Shields back up at 48% and climbing. Atmospheric pressure normalizing in all sectors. Communications are syncing globally again." Kai let out a breath. "No new incursion signatures?" "Nope. Whatever it was, it's gone." Cortez looked around at her people. Tired, broken, grimy and barely standing, but alive. "Then get me a line," she said quietly. "Global." Noor didn't ask what for. She just made it happen. A few seconds later, Cortez's face appeared on every remaining screen in the world, projected on shattered billboards, broadcast through military channels, played on scavenged radios and solar rigs. She didn't prepare a speech. There was no time for that, so she just spoke the truth. "This is Commander Evelyn Cortez of Olympus Corps." She took a breath. The maelstrom is gone. Even just saying it felt dangerous, like tempting fate, but she pushed on. "We didn't win through weapons. We didn't win through strategy. We survived because we remembered. We fought by feeling, by refusing to be forgotten." She paused. Let it settle in. "You didn't run. You didn't hide. You sang into the darkness and someone, heard you, and that was enough." The signal echoed across the globe. People cried, laughed, fell to their knees. "In the coming days, we'll dig out the rubble. We'll bury the lost. We'll rebuild. But we do so knowing one thing. Humanity stood when every other species fled. We stayed. We endured. And now, we begin again." She cut the feed herself. No applause, no ceremony, just silence. But a different kind of silence now. One filled with possibility. That night, Cortez didn't sleep. None of them did. Olympus Core became a different place in a matter of hours. Engineers climbed over wrecked panels, fixing power lines and reinforcing the shield generators. Medical staff returned from the depths of their shelters to treat burns, bruises, and fractured bones. They weren't running anymore. In the quiet corner of the base, Noor and Kai found something strange. Deep in the broadcast logs, buried beneath all the human songs and memories, they found a ping. A single data point that hadn't come from Earth. Encrypted, alien, very old, but it wasn't a threat. It was a reply. Cortez stared at the screen, blinking at the string of code. "What does it say?" she asked. Noor hesitated, mouth half open. "It's not in any known language, but the pattern—" Kai leaned forward. "It's music, some kind of tone series. The structure's mathematical, but it loops, like a chorus." Noor's voice trembled. "It's singing back." The three stood in silence as the signal played. Low, hollow, melancholy, but gentle. As if the maelstrom, or whatever was left of it, had left one final message in its wake. Not a warning, not a goodbye, just a reminder. It had heard them, and it remembered, too. In the days that followed, people began returning to cities. Scavenger crews lit fires in shattered towers to signal safe zones. Solar farms were repaired. Drones flew overhead, mapping the world's new scars. Entire villages reformed in the ruins, sharing food, power, and, most of all, stories. A movement spread, not religious, not political, just one simple phrase, painted on walls and carved into stone. We stayed. It became humanity's new flag. No symbols, no borders, just the truth. They stayed, they held the ground. And in doing so, they pulled a forgotten memory from the jaws of oblivion and made the void listen. Months passed. The Earth that emerged was not the one that had existed before the maelstrom came. It was quieter at first. Whole continents had scars that wouldn't heal for generations. Deep wounds in the land, cities erased, cultures fragmented. But amidst the rubble, something new grew. Not just rebuilding, reclaiming. They didn't call it a recovery. That word felt too soft, too clean. This was something messier, harder, more real. It was a process of remembering while moving forward, of learning to live with the ghosts instead of pretending they hadn't been there. Commander Evelyn Cortez stepped outside Olympus Corps for the first time in weeks. The wind felt different now, less poisoned, less heavy. The atmosphere was stabilizing, not because of any shield tech or terraforming miracle, but because the Earth itself was fighting to breathe again. Kai walked beside her, his eyes still constantly scanning the horizon, not out of fear, but habit. Noor trailed just behind them, a small device in her hand picking up signals, both human and otherwise. Every so often they'd still hear it, that echo, that low, lonely song the maelstrom left behind. It came in pulses, like whale song under the sea, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't getting closer, it was just there, watching, listening, and maybe learning. They passed a camp just outside what used to be Brussels. Kids played tag near the edge of a collapsed shopping mall. A man welded together metal scraps into a solar-powered generator, while a group nearby carved stories into long wooden planks, recording what had happened, what they had seen. Not for textbooks, for each other. To remember. People didn't trust digital archives anymore. They wanted things carved, painted, written in dirt and stone and blood if they had to be. Because when the darkness came, it had erased everything but the things they refused to let go of. When Cortez entered the circle of survivors, people turned. But they didn't salute. They didn't chant. They just nodded. That was enough. She took a seat on a crate someone offered and listened as a woman recited a tale about her brother, how he'd faced one of the maelstrom's tendrils with nothing but a broken radio and a stubborn belief that music was louder than death. He'd died. But his story didn't. Later that evening, as the sky darkened, Noor brought a new signal to Cortez. She didn't say anything, just handed her the pad. Cortez stared at the data. It wasn't maelstrom. It wasn't alien. It was human. From where? She asked. Low orbit, Noor said quietly. Lunar surface, to be exact. Cortez blinked. I thought the lunar base was gone. We all did, Kai said, voice tight. But this says otherwise. It's been dormant, powerless, until now. The message was simple. We heard the sky sing. Is it safe to come home? In the weeks that followed, more signals came. From Europa, from the Martian colonies, from the broken Dyson ring around Titan. All these years they hadn't been dead, just cut off, silent, waiting. And now they were returning. And humanity, once isolated, once on its knees, was no longer alone. They had held, not just for themselves, but for everyone. At a small ceremony atop the Andes, where remnants of world leaders and rebel fighters alike gathered, Cortez stood behind a single wooden post. There was no flag on it, no government seal, just words carved in deep, honest lines. When every other species fled, we held the ground. People gathered around it like a sacred place. Some cried, some stood in silence. One little girl asked if the maelstrom would ever come back. Cortez knelt in front of her. "If it does," she said gently, "we'll remind it who we are." The girl tilted her head. "Humans?" Cortez smiled, tired but proud. "Number, the ones who stayed." And far beyond Earth, drifting in a part of the galaxy that had never known light, something stirred. Not in hunger, not in rage, but in recognition. For the first time in eons, it remembered a name, not its own, but theirs. And it sang, low and long and sad, not as a threat, but as tribute to the stubborn little world that refused to be forgotten, to the people who screamed into the dark and made the dark listen.